The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. This is episode 1, and I'm so excited to share with you why I'm doing what I'm doing and a little bit about my life. So as a little girl, I was born, as my mom says, crying and never stopped. And depression was something I battled for a very, very long time. Through my childhood, through my teenage years, very suicidal in my teenage years. And then as time went on, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, my heart began stopping. And it was a little bit of a mystery for a while. And then they realized my brain was not sending the signal to my heart to beat. And with that, they decided that I had to get a pacemaker because I was flatlining. I flatlined for 26 seconds, no heartbeat at all. And so in order to get my driver's license back, I had to get a pacemaker put in. And so I did. I did the surgery. And then it was about 3 months later, I started having this really excruciating pain. And I went back, and there was something wrong that day. I remember when I went back, there was something wrong where they didn't have a certain piece of equipment that they needed to look at things. And so they said, well, typically when we see this, it's because there's nerve pain and the patient's feeling some nerve pain from where we place the pacemaker, and we may need to relocate it. And so I thought, okay, I'm just being a baby. Let's move on. But let me rewind to the day I got the pacemaker. That day, I went in for the surgery, and the surgeon was running very, very, very late. I want to say it was absolutely over an hour. I think it might have even been a couple. I can't remember, but very late, not 20, 30, 45, like very late. And I remember telling the surgeon, I've always been a very straightforward person, but I remember telling him, if today is not your day, like we don't have to do this. If you're feeling a little off and frazzled from the previous surgery, we don't have to do this, because I had been told the previous surgery wasn't going as planned. And so I kind of assumed that he was probably not on his best game because, when things don't go planned, we're usually getting a little frazzled and stressed out. And so I had told him we could delay my surgery. And he said, no, no, it's fine. So we did the surgery. And then, like I said, here we are 3 months later having really excruciating pain that they're telling me is nerve pain. And so I went on with my life after that for about 3 weeks. And the pain got so bad that one night I realized, like, I'm done. My body isn't going to keep going by any means. Like, it's done. I can't do this anymore. And so then I had my mom take me to the ER in the middle of the night, and we went there, and they said, well, good news. It looks like you have a blood clot. We just got to find it. And so we did a CT scan, I believe it was, looking for the blood clot. It might have been a different test. I can't even remember, but they did not find a blood clot. They found blood in my lungs instead. And so then they couldn't figure that out, and they had no idea why my lungs were filled with blood. So then the night went on running tests and trying to figure things out. And there was actually a resident that was training, and he took my images around and finally found a doctor that was able to see that the wire had come loose from my heart and went into my lungs. And for those of you that don't know, a pacemaker is a device that will essentially beat for you or give your heart a shock so that it will beat. And it has two wires in it for the upper and the lower chamber of the heart. And one of the wires came loose, went through the heart into the lung, and it was continuing to work. So it was shocking me in my lungs. And that's what that pain was. And so that night they did turn it off, and they told me they weren't going to operate on me at night because the night staff was not as, I want to say, capable as the daytime staff, just because they are exhausted. And so we waited till the morning, and the doctor came in and he apologized. And he said that this happens like once a year. And I was that once a year case. And he said that he would go in and he would pull the wire out. And he said, one of two things is going to happen. He said, I'm going to pull it out, and your heart is going to either just close right up and you'll be fine, or I'm going to pull it out and you're going to start bleeding out, and I'm going to cut you down the middle of your chest, open you up, and do open heart surgery and try to save you. But I can't promise you it will work. And I often get asked if that moment was so scary, because people will think, oh, wow, that must have been one of the scariest moments of your life. I don't know if I would say scariest. I would say most eye-opening for sure. Really teaching you that life can really be gone in the blink of an eye. But this was very different from somebody knowing that they might make a decision where life could and couldn't end, versus like it was completely out of my control. It wasn't like somebody that's choosing to do a maybe somewhat reckless behavior that may or may not go well. It was different than that. Like, I had no choice in this. What was done, and I was already where I was, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so I also knew that I needed to keep myself calm, and I needed to keep my brain believing that things were going to be okay, because I knew, for whatever reason, I knew the fact about, drunk drivers often can survive a crash more times than their passenger, because if the driver is so relaxed from the alcohol, sometimes that can be what saves them. And so that was something that played into my mind, where I thought, wow, like I need to stay relaxed and I need to stay calm so that my body doesn't have any extra stress going into this surgery. And so that's what I did, as I tried to stay calm, and I spoke to my family, and I didn't necessarily say goodbye, but said I loved them, and just tried to keep hoping that everything would go as I wanted and hoped, because I wanted to live and I wanted things to go well. And so I went through with the surgery. And when I woke up, I remember waking up, and the first thing I did was like, did I get sliced open? And I hadn't. And I look back on that moment thinking, why did I even care? I woke up. That's all that really mattered, right? I woke up, and I'm so happy to be here. And that is something I have learned, is the vanity of life that we can often have sometimes, and the perspective that we have. The focus sometimes isn't where it should be. And I've gone through a lot of things where I've had to let go of self-image and really focus on the things that matter. And I know that all that I have been through is partly that, partly me needing to be able to let go of exterior things and really focus on what actually matters in this life. And I'm grateful for it. It's been a lesson that was hard at that moment, but it really has paid off in so many ways. And so I have no anger about it. Even though at the time it was very, very difficult, I look back with so much gratitude. And what I learned too in those moments was, when I was passing out, I was losing my vision. So I would come back with no vision at all, because I didn't have oxygen to my brain and I couldn't see. And so I had all these little moments where little pieces of me were taken from me. And you've got to put yourself in this situation sometimes and ask yourself, like, who am I without this piece and that piece? because you're still everything. You are still everything you are meant to be, even without those little pieces that you might think matter so much. They have nothing to do with the whole of you. They really don't. And so all of this has been such a blessing. And going through that, I then got to the other side. A couple years later, I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, a gastrointestinal issue. Again, facing some vanity issues because now I had this bathroom issue and I was bloated and having to go to the bathroom frequently and all the things that come with that disease and feeling very disgusting. And I look back and I'm so grateful for it because I look back and I know that I needed that wake up call and I needed that awareness to come to me to not care about the physical of it all and to really care so deeply about who I was on the inside and see the worthiness of the me, the inside person that I am, because that was something I had struggled with for so long. And for anybody that's ever been depressed, I think you can all relate and understand that we often don't feel worthy. So no matter how much we want to mask ourselves with hair and makeup and clothes and make it look like we're doing well and life is great, those things at the end of the day don't do anything. I would often look in the mirror and think, what's wrong with me? I've got it all together. Like, my life is good. I've got the friends. I've got like everything is good. There's nothing wrong with my life. What is wrong with me? But there was so much internal dialogue that I was having that was such negative self talk that it was putting in this depressive state. And so it was making me diseased. I got ulcerative colitis. And then years later, I ended up getting Lyme disease. And with that came the autonomic dysfunction and them not being able to figure out what was wrong. So at first it was like, oh, maybe you have MS. And then my body actually started shutting down to the point where they couldn't figure out why it was doing what it was doing. I remember going to the hospital and doing these tests, and they're like, well, we see it, but we don't understand why it's happening. Like your muscles just aren't, they're just not working. And so I remember seeing the doctor and she said, let me go through all your stuff and we'll reconvene in a few weeks. And so I went back and I remember the first thing she said to me and she said, have you ever heard of ALS? And I said, yes, I have. And I knew what that was. And I knew what that meant. That meant the end. For most people, it means the end. And so that's when I decided to start doing all this research because throughout all my life, I have learned to look back on everything that has happened and ask the why questions. Like, why are these things happening? Because this isn't normal. When I was dying at 20 years old, like, is that normal? It's not. So why is this happening? I knew I had to get to the bottom of why everything was happening to me. There has to be a root cause. Things don't just happen. There's always a reason for things happening. A flower doesn't just bloom, right? Like it has to be watered. The seeds have to be planted. There's all these pieces that always make things happen. And it's the same with our own personal lives. And you have to be able to take the time to reflect and figure it out. And at that moment or at that time, what I was able to do is just look at why do people have ALS? And what I found was there were some viral infections that people often had with ALS, and that was what was triggering and causing the ALS. And so there was a few different things I tested positive for that are pieces of it, and one of them being Lyme disease. And so then I found out I had Lyme, but then I also found out that when you have Lyme, you often have parasites and you often have mold because when you're not getting better from Lyme, it's because there's all these other things in your body that are needing to be treated. And so I ended up going on my honeymoon, and it was actually probably one of the darkest times of my life. Unfortunately, I always tell my husband we need a redo. And I know we'll have it one day. We'll have it. We need a redo because I spent so much of that honeymoon doing research and trying to figure out how I was going to live and survive so that we could keep having this beautiful life together. And I was trying to connect with anybody and everybody that I could that knew of somebody or had gone through something similar and had some sort of idea of how Lyme could be treated because Lyme has also killed people. And so I did all this research and I connected with someone who I think she was in Australia. And she was telling me about often having oral infections where things are sitting and got to deal with that. So I obviously did the research there and did the scans and found out, yes, I did. My wisdom teeth cavitations were infected. And so that was something I had to deal with. But there were all these little pieces. But one thing that she said helped the most was doing ozone and doing this 10 pass ozone treatment where your blood is pulled out and cleaned essentially with the ozone and then given back to you. And they do it 10 passes. And so I want to say it's almost half of your body's blood, but don't quote me on that. It's something like that. And so I did that several times and then I started walking again and I started slowly feeling better. And once I started feeling better, I was able to start putting more of the pieces of the puzzle together. And then eventually I was able to treat things enough that I could get off of all treatment and keep going. And I got to a point where I was very stable and I still am very stable. And I'm hoping it's all gone and I'm good. I mean, we're always going to have viruses and bacteria and all these different things that are coming and going within our bodies, but we just have to be strong enough that our bodies can keep going no matter what. And I've gotten to this point where I can sense when my body feels a little off and I know how to deal with it. And when I was in my late 20s, I was also in this abusive relationship and it was verbally abusive, I will say. There was one little physical instance, but it wasn't anything crazy. But I will say I got depressed again at that point. And what ended up saving me was finding this therapist that did cognitive behavioral therapy. And I started learning that my internal voice was really what was putting me in this depressive state. And I had no idea that I was even talking that way to myself. And so once I was able to change that dialogue and get rid of that boyfriend, I was able to start getting better. And all of this has played into where I'm at today because I have learned the power of the mind and how important our thoughts are and the role that they play in our lives. And so I have actually gone on to do Dr. Rewire's facilitator program. And that program was all about learning to see things very objectively. Because when we see things one sided, it makes us ill. So when we see things very negatively or even very positively, it can make us sick because our brains aren't balanced and we need to be able to have that balance in our lives to be well. And so I've learned that and I'm sharing that with the world. And I'm hoping people can start to learn that when things don't feel right in your world, whatever it be, a relationship or illness, it's because you don't have the balance in your brain and you've got to seek that balance where you can see it more than just one way and one side. And I'm here to share stories of other people's tragedies to triumph. And that's the goal with this show is to have people come on and share their really, really difficult, dark days. And then for you all to be able to see that it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. And that we can all make a conscious choice to shift and have a different life because perspective is a choice and your perspective creates your reality. So when we start to understand that, we can understand the control we have over our lives. So if you really think about that, you think about how every situation you've ever been in or you ever will be in, the perspective that you place on it is your choice. Your mind can see it whatever way you want. And if you're diseased, you've probably only been seeing it one way. And it's probably more of the poor me way or having the it is what it is mentality or these are just the cards I was given. But that's not really how it is. There's a way that everything can be in alignment for you. And so it's really important you start gaining that balance. And so I hope by sharing all these stories, everyone can watch others share their journey and walk through their struggles and get to the other side. I want people to see that there is a other side, that life is not just, it is what it is. So thank you for listening to episode 1. I am more than excited to be sharing everyone else's stories more than my own, because I have some really great, very empowering stories coming. And feel free to reach out to me if you have a story that you want to be shared that you think would empower others, because that's what this is about, is helping people get unstuck and seeing that they can live the best life that they've ever imagined. It's possible for all of us.